Good afternoon and welcome to this today's Mind Chat. Starting today, we start a journey into Israel. We were supposed to have our next Scaleup Summit in Tel Aviv in 3 weeks from now. Obviously, COVID-19 has slightly changed our plans, and we were forced to turn our Scaleup Summit. It is our usual format when we gather international corporates and scale-ups in specific ecosystems. We were forced to turn the Scaleup Summit into fully digital. But we decided that some specific content that we typically share with our audience during the summits were valuable to have a broader audience. And specifically during our summits, we have the opportunity to interact with local innovation leaders. And we wanted to give the opportunity to extend such an interaction with our broader audience. And so today we will have a very, very special guest. Specifically will be Natalie Refuah. Natalie Refuah is a partner at Viola Growth. Viola Growth is part of Viola Group. And it is one of the largest, with probably one of the largest reputation VC in Israel. And so we'll have the opportunity to discuss with Natalie about what is very specific of an ecosystem that is thriving at world level in terms of innovation. But before starting, let me launch this short video that presents our today's guest. So this is Viola. Viola Group is a large investment group in Israel, over 3 billion under management. And we have the pleasure to have with us today Natalie Refuah, that is one of the partners of Viola Growth. Hi, Natalie.
Hi, Alberto. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Unfortunately, we were supposed to meet at the end of the month, and but again, someone or something changed our plans. But we decided it was a good time to reconnect, at least on a virtual basis. So before starting, I think it would be very good to give again. We have seen the video. You are celebrating your 20th anniversary. Just give you the data point in terms of Viola.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm laughing a little bit because this video was prepared for the 20th anniversary of Viola that we had to cancel eventually. So you are the first one seeing this video.
Okay, that's the premiere. Good to know.
March, and we had a big celebration that we had to cancel last minute. So at least I'm happy that you see it. And we have been... So we've been around for 20 years, not Viola Growth, but the entire group, starting in 2000 with a VC fund and then expanding into more vehicles. As you mentioned, we are managing about $3 billion over these different asset classes that are mainly composed of VC investments, growth investments, fintech, and credit. So all of these investments are in technology companies. And I think we're the largest group in Israel for tech investments with about 80 people. And the way that we work is that each of the funds is managed by a different team of investors, different pockets and different strategy. We just make sure not to overlap with each other. And we have a team that you can see here on this slide that is giving the professional resources for each of the funds. HR, legal, investor relations, finance, marketing, and so on. We have a very large BI team or activity that gives us a lot of insights about the market and helps us in the decision-making processes. So what you've seen in the video is the 200 companies logos that we invested in since inception altogether.
That's quite a lot, I would say. And then I think one of the topics that we'll discuss over our conversation that you're also increasing in the level of seniority and the amount invested year over years. And it's part of also the process of maturation of the Israeli ecosystem that is happening, especially spike up in the last 5 years, is something that will definitely go back. So going back to the basics, going back to Israel, there is a slide number 4 that we put together that gives in a glimpse why Israel is Israel. Can you probably comment over that?
Yeah. I'll just mention one thing about myself, that I'm part of Viola Growth. We are investing in the growth stage company, and I'll touch base on it later on, that indeed when we were formed in 2008, the growth stage investments was really at infancy stage, And today it's the major part, I think, of the investment landscape here in Israel on the tech side. So that's interesting to see the trend, and we'll go through it later on. So Israel is a technology-based economy, as is written, and you mentioned that we are number one in the world in R&D expenditure as percentage of the GDP, which is correct. And I think that you can see also in the numbers, we have the high tech is a very meaningful part of the economy in Israel. It's close to 10% of the Israeli workforce. It's number one in the world. And it's 50% of the Israeli export is technology. So we could see it actually now in the COVID-19 lockdown and all the implications on the economy. You could see that the government sees the high-tech sector as something that should be preserved as much as they can. And I think that the government continues to think all the time how they need to continue and nurture the high-tech sector here in Israel. And we can discuss, we can go to the next slide, slide 5.
Yes, and just a specific on this one that is super interesting is that is almost roughly 10% of the workforce and 20% of the GDP, and 50% of the export. So showing that is really, when we are referring to Israel, like is one of the innovation factory for the world. Again, there is 20% of the GDP coming from the tech innovation is a lot. Again, there are no comparables elsewhere in the world. And the fact that is probably the main exporting source of value, I think is another super interesting data point that will be connected with some discussion we'll have later on, talking about the M&A, and the M&A is mostly performed by external foreign companies. So that is, I think, super interesting data point.
And yeah, I agree. And we can touch a little bit on additional data points in slide 5. You mentioned that more than 2,000 startups. We are the number one country in VC investments per capita in the world. And Israel, although we are quite a small country, only about close to 9 million people, we are the third largest number companies listed on NASDAQ after the US and China.
Yeah.
And there are more than 350, 375 multinationals R&D centers here in Israel.
On this specific topic, 2 comments. Number one is talking about startups. We are mapping, as you know, the scale-ups that are the most mature ones. And we found out that there is about 2,000 scale-ups. A company raise at least 1 million. So there is a pretty interesting ratio of not only a wide number of startups compared also to the population, as you mentioned, but also the ability to produce mature company able to scale up and grow is becoming stronger and stronger. And regarding the R&D centers, we will publish our new report at the opening of our digital summit on June the 23rd, and we have mapped all the corporates that have an innovation presence in Israel, and the number are close to what you say, about probably 200 innovation outposts of a foreign company that have a strong presence in Israel. So this is something that we will publish in 2 weeks. I will send you a digital copy, at least you can have all the most updated numbers. Sorry for interrupting, but again, there is another data point to support it. Israel is relevant as an innovation factor, is relevant for starting a new company, but also is becoming more relevant, producing more mature, larger companies.
Correct. And I think it's a cycle. At the end of the day, you will, once we started as a nation to put the technology innovation as an important factor for the country, and other characteristics that we can go through and check why is it so successful here. So as long as you keep this cycle rolling, the numbers are increasing. This is a nice slide that shows technology that was invented in Israel, that maybe some people don't really know that it was invented in Israel, but they're really embedded in our lives. So Mobileye, everybody knows it was acquired by Intel. I think it was 2 years ago, for safe or autonomous driving, Waze. The Discon key, I don't know if people know that it was invented in Israel in a company.
Dov Moran,
M Systems. Yes. Checkpoint was the first firewall in the world, and still very, very successful and huge company. On any computer, you have the Pentium, Intel inside. The picture on the right side is the irrigation system of Netafim that is spread all around the world. So it's really many of technology that was invented, features or products that were invented in Israel are used all around the globe, and sometimes people don't even know it, that it was invented here. Yeah.
And the real question now is how is that possible? Again, going back to the reason behind the high propensity to innovation of a small country. You mentioned 9 million people. How is possible that these 9 million people are producing so much innovation? And so I think it would be good to investigate through together with you, again, help us to understand what are the reasons that are behind this gigantic ability to produce innovation at large. And that is something that I think would be good.
Yeah. So if we jump to slide number 8, then it's we've been trying to pinpoint what are the main reasons for this success, and I will go through one by one very briefly.
Yes, because all of them are important. Yes.
Yes. So maybe I will start with the military. It's in the middle, but it's a very important factor in the success of the technology ecosystem. All of us go through a military service, and some of us are combat soldiers, but some are in the intelligence units and in cybersecurity and in many areas that we're actually developing technology before the commercial markets for security reasons. And some of the early technology companies in Israel came out of the military service. And you bring people that are at the age of 18, 19 to the military service. They have a lot of responsibility, and they are immediately exposed to the highest tech levels, and they are being asked to develop and to promote advanced technology. They get a lot of responsibility at a very young age, and they need to be leaders of their own, actually. So going out of the military service, they come with two things. A, with the technology that they learned and expanded through their military service, and B, all the skill set actually that is needed for entrepreneurs, the leadership, not to be afraid to try and maybe fail. And so this is a major part of the creation of entrepreneurial companies here in Israel. Going back to the government,
I'm going to say one thing on the military that I think is super interesting. I think it would be good to briefly touch base on the 8,200 unit. Again, there is a lot of, obviously, it's becoming one of the pin that everybody. Yesterday, for example, I was over the phone with Ravit Barsha. She's the manager of Kamet Ventures, and she's coming from 8,200. So help us to understand why 8,200 is different and relevant. So what's in there?
You know, I was also in
I know. That's why I'm asking. Yes.
It's so difficult for me to speak about it because when I was there, I wasn't even allowed to say the name of the unit. Even my parents didn't know where I serve, and that was at the time. Today, it's much more known, but I'm still stuck in the past that I'm not supposed to speak about it. But really, I think that what's the uniqueness about this unit is that it was always before everybody else, before the commercial markets, before things were out for civil ability to use. They had to be, and we have to be, because we are a country that has to make sure that it has the best intelligence. We had to develop ourselves the top tier of the technology, the state of the art of the technology, and a lot of capital is invested in it, and a lot of thinking. And so I think that 8200 is the one of the best units probably in the world for intelligence technology. Specifically over the past years, it's also leader in cyber security.
So going back to try to wrap it up, the first pillar, that is military defense. That's, by the way, something that Israel share with Silicon Valley. Also at the base of probably one of the ability to innovate that is in Silicon Valley is strong dominance of the defense sector and investment into defense, into military. And so this is probably one of the few common touch points between Silicon Valley and Israel. But going back to Israel, let me know if I got it right. The time spent during the military service is something that put young people in front of responsibility on the one hand, of also the responsibility to leading a team. That is one of the core components of being an entrepreneur. The ability to manage a budget, money, because that's something that I think, if I got it right, they get also some money to manage, and then a high level of technological equipment. And so these young people are in front of responsibility, sometimes also, unfortunately, risk of life. And so that's put even more responsibility over themselves, and then ability to lead a group, to manage a budget, and to deal with technologies. Again, put all together at a young age, I think is a powerful mix of ingredients that I think propel the entrepreneurial spirits into many of you guys. And that is probably something that you see, how many entrepreneurs are coming out from Israel, how many people have a strong attitude to look at new technologies, strong attitude to starting new things, to launching new venture. I think this is my personal wrap-up. Let me know if it's right or wrong, but that's what I got.
You're totally right. That is the case. And on top of this, when they come out of the army, so some of them, by the way, stay in the army for more than the mandatory, that is 3 years. So they spend 5, 6, 7 years in the army. They come out of it sometimes after first degree that they've done along their service, and then they come out also with the technology that they know. Which is very strong, and so they can start from that point in a much stronger position than any other else.
And they can spin off some of the technology they were working with, because that is part probably also the ability to spinning off the technology they were working on during the military service. Part of them might be readapted to commercial use.
Yeah, that's part. They are not really spinning it off, but they have all this knowledge that they can continue from there.
Transferring knowledge, not spinning out, but transferring knowledge. Okay, good point. Okay, going back to government, that is the other pillars that you.
Yeah, so going back to government, I don't think I have a specific slide on it, but the government in Israel, well, in the 70s, Israel was very famous for its ability to export oranges. But at the end, when we developed and were able to see very good companies coming out of Israel in the technology space, the government understood that this is the right path and started with a plan called Yozma. It's very old, but they actually did a matching $1 per $1. So for every VC fund that was supposed to or wanted to be created and fundraise, the government said, you will bring $1, we will match you with another $1. And that was basically the initiation of the VC landscape here in Israel. And that money was, most of it coming from global investors. So that was one thing. And the second is that the government continues to put a lot of money in R&D funds. You will speak with Aaron, so he will tell you about Israel Innovation Authority's activity. And that is a major part of supporting technologies through different initiatives and all the time trying to create new supporting tools for the industry. Then I'll jump to the academy. Yeah. So I don't know how much you know the Jewish mother, but it usually pushes its son or daughter towards academic studies. And I think we have you can see in slide 9 that we have very large number of Nobel Prize winners per capita, the highest actually. And we have the highest number of.
Should be something good in the air, probably, because it's.
Sorry?
Should be something good in the air again if you have so many Nobel Prizes.
I think it's something in the ambitions of the people.
Yeah, exactly.
And most of the people, also the Jewish mother, not only likes that you will go to the university, but they also like you to be better than your neighbor or cousin. So it's a very competitive environment, and the highest number of engineers per capita, a lot of scientists and engineers. Part of it actually was also supported by the Russian immigration to Israel. Yeah. That was in different waves in the 70s and in the 90s, and that was really most of the people that immigrated to Israel from the Soviet Union, the former Soviet Union, were with scientific background, so definitely the population and the community here in Israel likes to study in the university, and out of the university you have also innovation that comes out. I can tell you about 3 examples. So one of is Mobileye that started in something that was invented, or the basic technology was invented in the Hebrew University. And we in our portfolio also have one company called Lightrix that came out of 5 PhD from the Hebrew University, and still continues to employ many of the physicians and scientists that come out of the Hebrew University. So you see it all across the country. We don't have a lot of universities, but the ones that we have are very progressing in terms of the innovation and technology.
And a specific question about education. I think one of the main problems that we have in Western economy, including the US and including Europe, is that scientific and technological universities are mostly assessed by men and less by women, at least historically, and still, if you look at the percentages of admission, are pretty low. It looks to me, again, but this is just my opinion, and I'd like that maybe you can elaborate a bit more, that in Israel definitely also there is a more participation also in scientific and technological studies by women, that also increase also the pool of talents again, because if not, you're limiting. Is it something that is, I got it right or not yet?
I don't have the numbers and the statistics. My impression that just from reading, and speaking to people, that it's better than it used to be, but I'm not sure that it's yet there where we want it to be.
Yeah, sure.
And also it depends on which department. I think that in computer science, still not a lot of participation of female But maybe in the science, like biology, chemistry, it's more common. So I think it's getting better. Also, I know that the military or the army is doing a lot of efforts to bring women to the technology side. But I'm not quite sure that it's much better than in Europe or the areas that you know.
Okay, well, still uphill also over there. Okay, because I got my impression. I was mostly talking with many of you, and then there is a lot of bright female people in investment, in startups, and so that's again my from my modest observatory, it looks into me that it was a situation definitely more open than compared to other countries.
It's definitely better than it used to be.
Yeah.
I just don't have the numbers to support it.
Okay.
In the investments, there's still way to go.
Yeah, fortunately it is. But again, you are a good example of that.
Thank you.
We have bright people, and the more women we bring on board in top position, typically the better outcomes might arise. I think this is something that is common sense, but unfortunately is not well. Unfortunately, it's not well widespread. And then, if you just to give you a stupid example, we this week was being published in Italy the tracking app for the COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
If you download the app, the image is an image of a man working at the laptop and a woman with a baby and so that has been the way we are presenting it. It tells you a lot in terms also how do we need female also coding and doing design that just immediately say, oh, this is not the right way to pose the problem. Again, it was not intended totally, but still give us a small example of how behind and how much road I have to be done again. But again, the direction is that one.
I can speak about it for a long time, but for now we'll keep it aside.
Yeah. Again, we touched the point again. Still work in progress then. Okay, cool.
Yeah. Maybe I'll touch upon last 2 points are the entrepreneurial culture.
Yeah,
so I think we have it. I think it's interesting on slide 11. Part of it is coming through the military services we discussed. But also, I think that there is something in the Israeli culture that impacts or accelerates the number of entrepreneurs. One is that we actually see innovation as survival. I think it's more on the geopolitical situation of Israel, but also because we want to continue to be the fastest or the strongest country. So we know that technology and being strong on innovation will help us for sure. Another cultural factor that is interesting is that failure is an option. In some cultures that you walk through around the world, you see that people are afraid to try because they're afraid to fail. And here, we actually kind of like it when we see an entrepreneur that already failed. And you see on the statistic on the side that 10% of the entrepreneurs founded more than one company. So it means probably they failed at least once. So I think this is a major part of our culture and this fact. Out of the box thinking, this is something that is also very characteristic for Israelis, always trying to think differently, to invent something that nobody else thought about, and because we're not afraid to make mistakes, then we are doing something that people might think it's crazy. And the last point is also very important because we are, and especially if you compare it to Europe, because our country is so small and because the market here is not usually is not in a sufficient market to really succeed, then most of the technology companies need to be global from day one, which means that when you create a company or establish a company, you have to look around you and see what you're doing different globally, not only in Israel. So it makes you more sharp on what you need to do, where you need to excel, which are the areas that are untouched, or there is a place for a player to be the dominant or the leader. So everything needs to be more towards the leader globally. And so I think this is a major part of also the success of the technology ecosystem here.
Yeah, again, the attitude of, again, this is a problem for us working with large corporation, again, and trying to open their doors to innovation and to startups. You know, in the traditional corporate world, it's complicated to assume that 1 out of 5 is actually is a very good ratio of success. And for them, typically are risk averse, and 5 to 5 is the ratio of acceptance in the corporate world. And again, having this ability to fail is the only way that you can do something different and innovative. And that is something that's most of the time is the first killing bullet for any possible innovation, in your fear to fail, or your fear that you will not be successful, because if not, you will stay in your backyard and you will not move out. But the fact that in Israel the country is small, you're forced to look globally from day one, and the fact that you are allowed culturally to fail is something that probably is one of the big propeller for innovation. Going to the main topics, that is investments into startups, VC investments. I think there are some interesting data points that I saw from your slides that I think it would be important to share.
Yeah, we can jump to slide 15.
Yeah.
Where you can see the data point about total investments in Israeli startups in billions of dollars. It's a little bit small. I hope that you can see it. But yeah, you can see that up until about 2013, 14, it's been quite steady between 1.5 to 2.5 billion invested in Israeli technology companies. But then it's been increasing tremendously towards more than 3 times, even in 2019, to $8.6 billion.
Yeah.
And this is a major change that started in 2015. And the main reason for the change is entrance into the growth stage investments. You can see it in the next slide, if you move on, that most of the increase is the purple side. On the left chart, you see Israel. The right side is global investments, just for you to compare the numbers. Yeah. But when you look at the portion of growth stage investments is 5.3 in 2019 out of 8.6. So the major increase was in the growth stage. And this is something that we've seen in front of our eyes. As I mentioned, we were formed in 2008. It was really, really, really the beginning of the growth. It was not even called growth at the time. It was tech PE or something like that. Mm-hmm. And only in about 5 years after, it started to really emerge and become a major part of the ecosystem. And if you also move on to slide 17, you can see the mega deals that are done in Israel, what we call mega growth rounds. These are rounds around above $100 million. You can see these numbers increasing all the time. Even in 2020 so far, we had 8 mega rounds.
In 5 months, including COVID-19. So that's a lot. Can you make some example of these mega rounds? Something you participated recently?
Recently, there was a mega round in the VIA, automotive or shared transportation company. We had Monday. They had several mega rounds. Lemonade in the insurance space, Lightrix that I mentioned to you earlier. So there are quite a few companies. You said that your report shows about 2,000 companies in the growth stage. So I guess this number is quite correct. And major part of these growth stage companies are companies that are raising very large rounds.
So we're talking about 100 million and over in terms of funding round, right?
Yeah.
And I think this is a big differentiator, and it is super interesting also from a political perspective, because again, one of the largest struggle that we have in Europe is that, again, we've done a very good job in investing into the startup ecosystem. European level, obviously there are some countries that are more ahead than others. The UK is definitely the leading country in Europe. France and Germany are close, not close, are behind, but are relevant. And the problem that we see over there, that we have done a good job in increasing the number of startups, but then we are a good job in providing early stage capital. I think you can find easily in Europe something up to 5 to 10 million. But then when you have to move to the next step, it is 100 million plus rounds. That's what you call the mega rounds. There is not such a big offer in Europe. And then typically the problem is that the company are moving outside of Europe, typically in the US. When they welcome them, help them to grow, and typically they become US companies, partially US companies, what we call dual companies. Part of that remain in the US and part of that remain in Europe. That is better than nothing, but is not ideal because you are losing part of the value. Because again, one of the secrets of investing into innovation, that the more you're able to fund internally, the larger will be the payout. And then I think Israel is super interesting as a case, because Israel before 2015 was mostly like Europe is today, producing a lot of innovation, but this innovation would be or had to be exploited elsewhere. And then the number of IPO and NASDAQ is still a good indication that is still happening. And then also in terms of mega round, they were moving to the US to becoming funded. Now you are bringing home also this the growth stage. And so we are creating more value inside the country, and in a way that you get a larger payout later. I'm wrong, or
I think that the model was always the same here. The model is that the investors, the US investors, the European investors, the Israeli investors were always supporting the Israeli companies. And we had many US funds actually establishing offices here or scouting here, coming every often to look for companies and investing in them. So that was one part of the model. The second part of the model was that the Israeli companies, as I say, global from day one. So usually you'd see a part of the management in the US. Usually that would be the target market. But the R&D team stays in Israel. So even when the company scales and have a lot of its management in the US or European markets, the R&D team is in Israel. So it's not a 100% Israeli.
It's a mix.
It's a mix. Now, what I could see over the last years that you see very, very big companies like Wix or Fiverr, that all of its team or most of its team in Israel. The headquarters is still in Israel. That is also a trend that is we could see in the last few years. But in most of the cases, you'd see the headquarters moving to the US and the R&D staying here in Israel. And then you benefit from both. You're benefiting from the close to the market in the US, but also from the innovation strong team here in Israel. But what changed is actually, I think, the availability of capital that was not here before for growth stage investments. We could see the large growth funds coming to Israel. We could see the creation of more growth funds like us. Because I can tell you that for 5 or 6 years, we were the only growth fund in Israel. Now you have a few more, not many, but a few more. And but you see much more growth US funds that are scouting around and looking to deploy capital in Israel. And you also see a change in the mindset of the VCs and in the mindset of the founders. Because in the early days, it was really difficult for a growth fund to invest in a VC-backed company, because the VC said, why should we bring you in? This is our excellent company. Now they understand, for many years now, they understand that it's good if you bring people after you with large checks. And also the founders, they want to create big companies. They saw that it's possible, and their ambitions were adapted to the thinking that they can create big companies. And you see examples. So one of the things that we do in Viola, for example, we have an Israel Growth Summit. We bring in all the growth stage companies, CEOs and founders, and we put them all for half a day with a lot of content. And we show the young entrepreneurs or the earlier growth stage companies how it is possible to create very big companies. And then they learn from each other and they see that it's possible, and they have the patience and the motivation to create big company. It's also psychological impact of seeing what you have around you. This is at the beginning.
Yes, role model. And you need to get there to show that it's possible, and obviously it requires some time. But it's pretty clear that there is an acceleration of the phenomena, and there is most also Israeli company that has been invested in the later stage part of the curve, meaning that you will also benefit from the full outcome of the investment period. Because again, one of the most discussed topic is why accelerators do not work. Because again, you do a lot of effort and then you're not able to follow up the post-achievement, the few post-achievement you are able to produce, because you don't have the capital to follow up all the way up to the Airbnb. Yeah. Except Y Combinator that decided to add their own fund in order to follow up. And unless you're able to do that, yes, you're producing a lot of good stuff, but at the end you're not just take a small percentage of the payout. And now if you're able to follow up the full investment curve, you will be able to take the full payout together with the others, not exclusively you. But this is the main change that it happened in Israel, has not yet happened in Europe, and I think this could be a super interesting data point.
I call it the maturation of the industry. It's a maturity process, and also another interesting phenomena is that the entrepreneurs that were selling their company early on, the buyers of their companies, I don't know, if they sold the company for $100, $200 million about 20 years ago, they went to work for the multinationals for a few years, stayed in the US, saw the big companies, how they managed, and then they came back to Israel and did their second and third companies. And now they have much more patience because they already did their exit, and they are better managers. They've seen how executives in the US are working. So it's things that are being studied all the years. Yeah, and now you're showing the unicorn formation in Israel. This is a major change, because back in the past, when you said $1 billion valuation, it was really something that you could only aspire to, but you haven't really seen it. It was very, very rare. But it's being accelerated over the last years, and even in 2020 until now, we have 8 companies. I don't know. You have. Maybe you can go back to slide 20. I want to show you that in the past, the number of unicorns was really small, and you could see really amazing companies, but not many were unicorns. And over the last 5 years, this number has been increasing tremendously all the time. So as I mentioned, it's a progress through the maturation of the industry, as we discussed.
Yes, and this is amazing. Again, I show you that I call it the venture game, a sort of an accrual game. You cannot seed and harvest. You seed, and then the larger the seeds, the potentially larger the outcome, but it takes some time. So as you say, it's a maturation of the environment that is coming out. And another interesting data that you have is the number of exits and the size of the exit. Again, Mobileye, I think, has been one of the poster children here, but there are some other interesting examples. Probably is interesting to touch base over here.
Yeah, I don't have here the exact number of exits, but we put some examples. You can see it in slide 22.
Yeah, exactly. This one, yes.
Yeah, actually, yesterday we had one exit here in Viola. A company called the Optimal Plus was acquired. I think it's $365 million. We Move It. It's the last deal that was announced. I think in the middle of the COVID. Probably it was closed before.
Yes.
But $1 billion, a great, amazing company. So definitely, these are just examples. Habana, it's an exit from the last year in the chipset. So definitely very, very large exits. We had 2 IPOs last year on the NASDAQ, Fiverr and Tufin. Fiverr today is close to, or more even, $2 billion in valuation. So definitely, you don't only see the numbers in the investment side, you also see them on the exit side. And
that's obviously the more exits, the more capital to be invested, and they will go faster, and the radius is larger. That is the secret of investing. Again, the more money you produce, the more money you're able to put into the system. And I think some early exit that we have shown before also allow to support the increase of the investment that we are experiencing today, and then will increase the process. So we are coming to the end of our discussion. I wanted to touch base with you about how COVID-19 has modified the investment landscape. First of all, before talking about numbers, how's life in Israel now?
Life in Israel is quite good so far. Everybody is fearing a second wave, but we've been at home from mid-March until actually the end of April, so about a month and a half. And from then on, we started to gradually go out, first back to work, second back to schools, and restaurants and cafes were opening, I think, last week. So it's really the opening up slowly. Some people say it's too fast, some people say it's too slow. What I learned is that in COVID-19 is that there are like so many opinions on everything. So definitely for everything that happens, there is an opinion. About going back to the office, so we in Viola, we came back to the office quite fast, I would say, but I don't see the same pace in the high-tech sector. So most of the high-tech companies are still working from home. I believe that that will happen gradually as well over the next few weeks, but it takes more time. That's one question that still remains a question mark, whether people are going to come back to the office and how often they will work from home.
I think something will definitely change. I don't know how much, again, but that's something will definitely change, yes. But it looks like that COVID-19 has not impacted so much investment into Israeli startups.
Yeah, so if you go to slide 24, you can see the numbers on investments also in Q1, which are still very, very high. I don't know if it's very reflecting the real impact of COVID-19 because it's only Q1. I believe we will have to look at Q2 because in Q1, many of the deals that were announced were already closed before March. So we do have to see what will.
I think in Q2 or Q3, I think when we'll see most of the potential impact. I think Q1 might be interesting. Again, we are looking currently at the China numbers in terms of investments. And the Q1, they have definitely a slowdown and is picking up in Q2. But China is probably 3 to 6 months ahead of us. And so probably looking for potential forecast is Q2 and Q3 will mostly impacted by COVID-19.
Yeah. Well, looking around me, I see that some funds decided to stop or slow down their investments. We had this discussion here in Viola, and we actually decided not to stop. So first, we moved on investments that were in process before COVID-19, and we didn't stop them. And we also actually developed a sort of strategy for the times that is more suitable. Because we usually deploy very large amount of capital, $15 to $20 million per investments. It's kind of difficult to do it when you're from home and you need to work without meeting people face to face. So we adapted to the times, and we're doing and are doing some investments that are smaller, $5 million, maybe companies that we know from the past that we can do fast processes. So we've been trying to be more flexible to the times, just not to sit outside of the fence and not do anything. But I could see a lot of different approaches to the situation.
Yeah, you have to count the one wounded first and to look at the portfolio company, check if the cash runway analysis, that is typical stuff. And that obviously is naturally slowing down the process. And then obviously something for
the whole first months that we were at home, this is mostly what we did, work with our companies, understanding their cash position, what they need to do, what are the impacts. It was maybe 1 month after we completed the budget for 2020, and then we had to open everything. But definitely this was a major part of our work. But I think that's all. From what I could see, all the Israeli companies were very, very fast to understand what is going on, what they need to do. Very responsible for their activity and their employees and their investors. So I think it was a very good lesson to go through and to see the response.
Yeah, I think that 2007, 2008, again, taught something that is how to preemptively react to potential endogenous driven situation. And I think we capitalized that experience despite the reason is totally different. And I think startups also start moving ahead to reshape activities in a way that can endure. And so, okay, I think we are come to the end of our conversation, Natalie. Thank you so much for the time. Unfortunately, we will not meet for my canceled trip to Israel by the end of the month. But we'll continue our Scaleup Summit discussion digitally. Thank you for your time. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you, Alberto. I didn't say, I want to say one word for the Italian people that are, from the very beginning, we were thinking about you all the time. You were all the time in our news, in the TV. We saw you singing from your porches, and it was really, I think there is a close connection between Israel and Italy, and you were definitely in our minds. So I'm using the opportunity to say it also.
Thank you. Hopefully, again, we have been hit from something that was difficult to predict, but again, we managed through. Again, there's been unfortunately a toll for that, but hopefully we'll go back to normal. And again, I don't know if it will be the same normal we were used to, probably a different normal.
The new normal.
Maybe a better normal for certain situations. Sometimes will be something we need more time to adjust, but that's what it is. And always looking forward, never look back. So thank you, Natalie, for your time. And let's touch base in person as soon as the world will go back to normal or sort of normal. Bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.